If you found me through the flurry of articles about transmaxxing, welcome. Today, I am making an attempt to correct some misconceptions, address some blatant misinformation, and translate this online culture's vernacular into something that's better understood. The incel. Disclaimer, I am not a professional. I'm just adding to some discourse because I love systems theory. For further learning material, you should check out all of them. Specifically this one, that's a good one. Involuntary celibate, incel, and the online communities of like incel are different. One is like a condition, like you can't get laid, and then the other is a community. Further, the term is muddied by the fact that some use it as an insult and others use it way too liberally. Sometimes they cast the net so wide that they include men all of the online manosphere, which is definitely too wide. So who are the incels? Most of the incel community, also commonly associated with the black pill, are socially ostracized and disregarded, and many are dissatisfied with the expected male social roles that they've been socialized into since birth, and their inability to like meet them, kind of. They're heavily neurodivergent on average, anxious, and eternally lonely. They find community through the internet, and they meet other social outcasts. Together, they discuss how they're treated, they empathize with each other, sometimes the only people that give them empathy, and they become friends. They finally have an opportunity to build a community. There are also online content creators that appeal to these kind of people. So there's a few main types. The first type is a grifter. They kind of capitalize off of these neurodivergent individuals with things like face ratings or courses, guides. Not all of the courses are guides, but most of them. Second is like philosophy channels. Usually these are pretty nihilistic, like black pill channels, but not always. And then other is like real people that just kind of share their lives with their audience. It's just like real people. Pretty common on the internet. Now, a lot of people do have edgy humor in this online area of the internet. Don't get me wrong. There have been incels in the past who have committed egregious acts, and there are incels who do really bad things, but not all incels are bad, and in fact, most of them are kind of just autistic. People are just like stigmatizing autistic people when they're stigmatizing incels, and that's really what they're making fun of. So like when applicable, incels are mocked for their appearances, their interests, their communication style, their way they talk, the way they act, the way they look, their smell, their hygiene. They're bullied at home, they're bullied at school, they're bullied at work. They don't really get any escape except for like these online communities and like the internet. They're made fun of for not being able to like, just go and do X, which is so often in the advice, right? It's like, oh, just go get laid. Like, oh, just go get a girlfriend. And they're like, I can't, bro. I literally am the worst. I'm the worst. Incels see themselves as literal scum because the world treats them like they're literal scum. Grotesque subhuman, genetic abomination, genetic subhuman. These are some of the creators that are popular in the incel community. So with names like that, how do you think that they feel about themselves? Okay, rant's over, but like, it was necessary. All of the articles want to paint everyone who transmaxes as like an evil incel. One, incels aren't really evil. They just can't get laid. Two, incels aren't even the primary target of transmaxing, although they are often a good candidate for it. AGP. My greatest apos. It's cold out there. I needed some respite. AGP, short for Autogynephelia, was proposed by Blanchard to be a theory that explained transsexualism. It refers to the propensity to be sexually aroused by the thought or image of oneself as female. Propensity means a tendency to behave in a particular way. This shakes out to mean the tendency to get turned on by the thought of oneself as female. As female refers to both sexual and non-sexual ways, activities, from having sex as a woman to being a part of a woman's knitting circle to just riding a woman's bike. The issue with Blanky Boy is that he wanted to explain the thought of oneself as a woman with the tendency to get turned on by, which led to his theory being wrong. And that's why he was quickly debunked. Well, he does have a few supporters, we could say. He has a few supporters. But most people say he's full of shit. And there's people way smarter than me that have talked about that. Honestly, check out this. The Julia Serano is a pretty good read. No, it was not the turning on that created the thoughts of wanting to be a woman, but but rather it was the body expressing excitement and joy of finally getting to leave behind the male husk of the body that you so desperately could equip, if even for a moment. The version of yourself you may have had to suppress completely for many years. But that's just a theory. A trans theory. Definitely not something I've ever felt. Nope, not even a little bit of, not even an ounce of AGP in this body. You see, many people equip the term AGP in one of a few fashions. The first is the self-acclaimed AGP. They use it to describe their journey with being trans. AGP means a love of self as feminine or as a woman. See Strawberry Lemonade Christina or Bambi. My personal headcanon is that self-dubbing yourself AGP is likely tied with some trauma. The suppression of self, your identity suppression, is traumatic. The other type of person that uses the term AGP is transphobes. They use it to stigmatize trans people. The most common usage, unfortunately, of AGP. And they do paint it as a sexual fetish, similar to Blanchard's view. AGP is something to be ashamed of because they don't understand it. Sometimes the people do both the transphobic and the self-acclaimed way, and I'm sure that there are plenty of other ways that people do use the term AGP, but these are the main ones that I see. My personal beliefs around the term AGP are that AGP is actually caused by the suppression of certain emotions and actions which are heavily encouraged for male socialization. What this means is the suppression of feminine behaviors or gay behaviors or other stigmatized things that are stigmatized when you grow up as a boy. Some people are more predisposed to AGP. For example, if you are predisposed for a gender transition, you might lean towards AGP rather than other copes under the same trauma, under the same identity suppression. And it's essentially a fixable trauma disorder. Not to give Blanky Boy any credit, but even he says that the cure or the fix to AGP is medical or social transition. Again, disclaimer, I am not a professional. I'm not a licensed doctor. I have a TikTok and field degree in chronically online. But that's just my 2 cents about it. And so many people disagree with me, and other people agree with me. So, yeah. The other thing that I want to add is that likely many of the self-dubbed and accurately labeled AGPs do feel some degree of negative emotion around their male selves, their masculinity, their manhood. Many people who are deep into their AGP without having started on their healing journey, or even some that have started on their healing journey, they've had to learn to live with the overwhelming degree of despair, of void, of negativity, of hostility that comes from having to suppress these parts of yourself. And they've acclimated to that as their baseline. But this condition is treatable, as mentioned earlier. Life, autonomy, and the freedom for happiness. As Paul Revere once said, the British are coming. They are coming to stop the great American pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I'm sick of it. You can't have it. It's mine. Everybody is entitled to their own life. They're entitled to their own liberty and autonomy of their own lives. And they're entitled to the freedom to pursue their own happiness. The only time violence should be taken is towards the bully, and forcing others to suppress themselves because you're a snowflake means you're the bully. Stop stepping on people's freedom. This is America. PU, it is cold. Transgenderism. One of the articles that spawned from the Pirate Wires article had a quote that social influence plays a role in transgenderism. Here, transgenderism is meant to refer to the changing of genders from one to the other. It is very based in the binary. It is a brash statement, so I will respond brashly. Don't sue me, bro. Okay? Just don't sue me, bro. Transgenderism exists because of the stigma around nonconformity and because of discrimination. But yes, you're right that social influence does play a factor in transgenderism. Social influence is the reason that so many trans people have attempted suicide. It's the reason that so many people are afraid to be the genuine, authentic version of themselves, and they choose to hide behind the mask. Social influence is the reason that so many trans people have waited so long to transition. And then, when they do transition, they finally overcome the social influence that's been given. They're told that they've done it too late. They did it too late. Shut up. So yes, unfortunately, I do agree that social influence does play a large role in transgenderism. Social influence is the reason that so many of my trans elders have been killed, have been discriminated against, have had to fight claw, tooth, and nail to get where they are today. Social influence is the reason why so many of my peers and myself struggle with a lot of anxiety. I'm going off script here. Social influence is the reason that a lot of people struggle socially, though. So I do unfortunately agree that social influence does play a huge role in transgenderism here. And of course, once we do find communities that won't ostracize us for being authentic, we're going to grow and evolve, and we're going to stay in those communities. And then we'll even stop hiding behind our old masks eventually. So it's not all negative social influence, but the vast majority of the influence that the average person is exposed to on a regular day is negative and othering, and an attempt to mock those different than them.
And so if you're seen as a monster for doing something, there's a great deal of shame around doing that thing. You're probably not going to do that thing. We also have to be careful with shame, of course, because it constricts behavior, but that's the benefit of it. It constricts behavior.
It's shame, and it's based out of ignorance sometimes, and others it's malice. It really depends on the day and the person and the situation. A fun fact about trans people is that a large number of them are also neurodivergent. A large amount of the negative rhetoric around trans people is, you guessed it, it's just ableism. It's mocking autistic people and neurodivergent people. Actual real people that society deems as weird. It's bullying again, and that does seem to be a common thread. So long story short, the transmaxxing community is one filled with, drumroll please, trans women at various stages in their transitions. Some chasers, many of whom give off very eggy vibes, and some have even self-dubbed themselves as AGP, or they've been given the AGP declaration by some others in the server. And many people who do self-identify with the term AGP. Lots of these people do come from spaces on the internet that have a lot of brainworms in them, such as 4chan or incel spaces. They're full of brainworms, negative rhetoric, and sometimes questionable actions. Many mainstream trans communities would not accept the language patterns or actions of these people and would cast them out potentially, even if they are attempting to better themselves. Transmaxxing is a more accepting place than many trans spaces online, and it is not really politicized. People from all walks of life are in the Transmaxxing server. It's an alternative space for trans people, and as a result, it gets the common ableism and transphobia that's directed towards all trans people. Plus, on top of that, it gets the transphobia and ableism from the trans community that, is trying to, other themselves from other groups. I don't know. We see that sometimes. Overall, transmaxxing is just another trans community. It's just a unique trans community for unique people. But it is a useful space for many people, and it is a space where many people are helped. GG, bye.